Greetings, and welcome back to the MCOC Encyclopedia. Today, we'll be covering the magical Spider-Man himself, Spider-Man Supreme, the phasing, nullifying, rooting, and burst damage dealing mystic monster. We will be breaking down all his abilities and the best ways to defeat him. Spider-Man Supreme has a few abilities that are always active, which play a key role in defeating him. He also has 3 blessings that we'll go through in a moment, all with different triggers. When fighting Spider-Man Supreme, both champions' first medium attack will place an indefinite Spider Seal buff on you. Doesn't matter which champion it is, the buff always goes on you. This is unaffected by ability accuracy and will be very important later on. These buffs also have an interesting interaction with the Mystic Dispersion Mastery. This mastery normally gives some power, depending on the level, when a buff is staggered or nullified, but for Spider Seal buffs, no power is given, and instead additional burst damage is dealt when they are removed. Finally, for each unique buff on the opponent, Spider-Man Supreme will reduce their ability power gain rate by 33%. So 3 unique buffs, and your power gain buffs basically won't work. More than 3 unique buffs, and you will actually start losing power. The power you don't gain, Spider-Man Supreme gains instead. Spidey Supreme has 3 blessings. Blessings of the Astral Form, Blessing of the Spider Totem, and Blessing of the Web. The Blessing of the Astral Form triggers when you gain an unblockable or unstoppable buff. It also triggers whenever you gain a Spider Seal buff. When the blessing triggers, Spider-Man Supreme will cause all incoming attacks to miss for 3 seconds. If Spider-Man Supreme nullifies any of the Spider Seal buffs on you, then this blessing will also trigger. If you do trigger the miss effect, however, once the phase timer runs out, this blessing will go on cooldown for 20 seconds. So, this triggers from a Spider Seal buff, meaning either champion's first medium attack can trigger this blessing. Whenever you gain a buff, Spider-Man Supreme gains a totem charge. At 10 charges, he triggers the Blessing of the Spider Totem for 20 seconds. This blessing grants a range of effects. Firstly, Spider-Man Supreme's first medium attack will nullify 1 Spider Seal buff and deal a burst of energy damage, and will deal increased energy damage if you have the Mystic Dispersion Mastery active. This will also trigger the Blessing of the Astral Form, because you've nullified a Spider Seal buff, and pause the Blessing of the Spider Totem for 1 second. Secondly, Spidey Supreme will gain a 55% attack increase and passively gain 25% of his max power over 9 seconds. This does, however, come at a cost of 70% reduced power gain from landing strikes or from being hit. Finally, if you trigger a buff, you will also gain a Spider Seal buff, triggering the Blessing of the Astral Form, and this will pause the Blessing of the Spider Totem for 1 second. Lastly, we have the Blessing of the Web. This triggers whenever Spider-Man Supreme lands a heavy attack, or when on defense, just every 15 seconds, unless you strike him with a heavy attack, then the timer starts again. This blessing grants Spider-Man Supreme a matching buff whenever you trigger a Fury, Precision, Cruelty, Armor Up, Pierce, or Regeneration. Spider-Man Supreme's specials vary between inconsequential and lethal, so let's have a look. The Special 1 places a Spider Seal buff on you for each hit, and on the final hit, you are inflicted with the Curse of the Web if the Blessing of the Web is already active. This will reduce the potency of future Fury, Precision, Cruelty, Armor Up, Pierce, or Regeneration buffs by 95% for 20 seconds, rendering them effectively useless. The Special 2 will deal additional red damage for each of the last 3 wave hits, and if the Blessing of the Spider Totem is active, each hit will also nullify a Spider Seal buff and deal even more burst damage. If the Mystic Dispersion Mastery is active, then this is 4 sources of burst damage that can really add up. The difference between the Special 1 and the Special 2 is that the effects of the Special 2 trigger through block, whereas the Special 1s do not. If you're finding this video helpful, please bless that like button. The Special 3 will root you for 4 seconds, though activating a special attack will end this early. Whilst you are rooted, any contact with Spider-Man Supreme will cause him to steal 2% of your current power, and will also place a Spider Seal buff on you. But as always, Special 3s are best avoided. Spider-Man Supreme's signature ability gives bonuses to each of his blessings. When the Blessing of the Astral Form goes on cooldown, Spider-Man Supreme will gain up to 15% of his max power. The Blessing of the Spider Totem will gain up to 50% increased burst damage, and the buffs granted by the Blessing of the Web will gain up to 50% increased potency. Spidey Supreme's primary annoyance comes from the miss that triggers whenever you gain a Spider Seal buff. So our first set of counters are standard miss counters. Human Torch over 10 temperature cannot miss and has excellent damage. Professor X over 25 charges gains vigilance, can't miss either. Neither of the Daredevils can miss at all if you're desperate, and any other vigilance or true sense option can work. Because Spidey Supreme triggers his miss when you gain a Spider Seal buff, we can also use fully buff immune champions. No Spider Seals, no miss. Top options here are Spider-Man 2099, Titania, Cassie Lang, and Red Guardian, though there are a few others. Our final option is to trigger the miss on purpose, and this allows us to use any champions, as it will then go on cooldown for 20 seconds. Champions with fewer buffs here are still better. Spidey Supreme's secondary annoyance comes from the burst damage on his Special 2. Learn to dex it, or just stick to baiting the Special 1. The Special 1 damage is relatively low, so just block it and you'll be fine. If Launcher and the Blessing of the Spider Totem is active, the burst damage on the Special 2 will be significantly higher. So, Spider-Man Supreme. Both champions' first medium attack will place Spider Seal buffs on you. Has 3 different blessings with different triggers. The first triggers when you gain a Spider Seal buff, Unstoppable buff, or Unblockable buff. This causes Spider-Man Supreme to phase for 3 seconds. The second triggers when you have gained 10 buffs total. This gives Spider-Man Supreme a damage increase and a power gain passive. The final blessing triggers when you are hit by a heavy attack, or every 15 seconds. This provides Spidey Supreme with the ability to gain matching buffs when you do from a set list. The best counters for Spider-Man Supreme are miss counters or fully buff immune champions. Make sure you can dex the Special 2, or the burst damage on the block will be painful. I hope this helps you against your future Spider-Man Supremes, and do let me know how your fights are going now. I'm currently working on Absorbing Man and 6.1.5 to continue the Act 6 run through, so look out for that. I also have a Discord server now, so join that for help with this or anything else. Thank you, and I will see you next time.